It's the first time that the Ayatollah, since the new protests have broken out in Iran, has issued an official statement. This is what the statement said today. It was today. Quote, "I say clearly that these riots and the insecurity were engineered by America and the occupying false Zionist regime, as well as their paid agents with the help of some traitorous Iranians abroad." We have Secretary Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, joining us now. He's part of our ACLJ team. And Secretary Pompeo, I just said, it's interesting to me that now the Ayatollah speaks out and he's trying to make it not about Iranians, that this is really Israelis and Americans who are behind this. What is your take?
Well, Jordan, this is pretty typical stuff. It shows, I think, three things at least. One, he's paying real attention. He views what's taking place there as serious and jeopardizing their capacity to continue to maintain control. Second, his health has not been good. And I think he was trying to reassure the Iranian law enforcement, the Iranian Basij, the IRGC, the leadership around him, that he is still well enough to be in charge and in control. And then finally, doesn't it remind us, Jordan, of exactly what Vladimir Putin has done? Same kind of thing. Somebody else started this fight. It wasn't us. It was the outsiders appealing to nationalism in a way that suggests a real frailty. So one doesn't know how this will end. It will almost certainly be very, very violent if these protests continue. They will stop at nothing to try and maintain control. But we know that there are always moments in time, inflection points in history, and perhaps this is just one of them.
It was interesting during the Obama administration when you had a million people in Tehran, in Tahrir Square, protesting. Basically, the administration's position was for them to stand down, which was absurd when you think about it. Now you've got about 1 million throughout the country protesting. The Ayatollah is forced to make a public statement, which he has, saying that this is, the Israelis and the Americans, the Zionists. And you've got and I want to see if we have this bite. It's one of the really human rights activists that have been at the forefront of this, saying, the women of Iran are taking up the mantle here, but don't prop up the bad guys. Don't prop up this leadership by giving them money through the Iran deal. Do we have that sound? We're gonna get that sound, and we've got it. Let me play it and then get your comment.
We don't want you to save Iranian women. Iranian women are brave enough to bring democracy themselves, to save themselves. But we want you to stop saving our murderers. That's all. Yeah. That's all.
Stop saving the murderers. And when you give them money, you're saving the murderers, Mr. Secretary.
Amen. That is exactly right. We have multiple examples of how America has responded. You're right. In the Green Revolution in 2009, the Obama folks wanted to stay away. They were trying to get their deal done. That when we were protests during our time, when I was a Secretary of State, we immediately put out statements supporting the Iranian people. And all the while, we were denying the people who were killing Iranians, the people who were imprisoning Iranians, the people who were threatening Iranians. We were denying them the resources to continue their terror campaign. And sadly, Jay, we're right back where we were in 2009 with this administration trying to cut a deal, not enforcing sanctions, and making these terrible human beings that are denying these women their basic and most fundamental rights, giving them money with which to continue their repression. It's an enormous mistake. It's not the case. The Ayatollah is wrong. This is not an American or an Israeli set of protests. This is an Iranian people's movement. What we shouldn't do is deny the Iranian people the opportunity to continue to express their free will.
And this gets to my next question. If the right support was there from the world and Iran, the regime, was facing real crippling sanctions and they didn't feel like they were maybe getting access and they weren't able to use their airline to fly across Europe, do you think we're at a point where one day we could see the people of Iran, not because of Americans, not a military exercise, but the people of Iran coming together to overthrow this regime? And it goes back to an Iran that my age group is pretty unfamiliar with, other than seeing the imagery out of, but an Iran very different from these religious radicals.
Jordan, I absolutely think it's possible. We never know. You can never predict the moment, but you do know this. Pressure over time is what makes the difference. And to the extent we're relieving the pressure, as Jay was suggesting, by providing the money, as you suggested, by allowing Mahan Air and Iranian Airlines to fly across the world, we are fueling the very repressive regime that threatens Israel, threatens American officials and former officials, threatens terror from Hezbollah. We're fueling that capacity for them to repress their own people in a way that permits them to behave precisely as we've seen since 1979. We should cut them off. We should apply pressure through sanctions, through all forms of capabilities that we have. And when we do, and when then the Iranian people demand their freedom and their liberty and their basic rights, we'll return to an Iran that the people of Iran will benefit from.
I'm going to ask one last question on Iran, and that is because with Iran, we've had this situation before, as you said, during the Green Revolution. If this movement continues, can it successfully topple this regime?
I think there's no doubt that it can. I think it's also important that all of us think about what that looks like the day after, Jay.
Yep. Because
that day will come. It's impossible to predict, but that day will come. The Iranian regime will not last forever. We should hasten that by continue to apply pressure. But we all need to be prepared for when that day comes to support the Iranian democracy movement, support the people who have driven this, and make sure that as the days move on, we need to give the regime the capacity to regroup, rearm, and reinstall its power, and provide the resources necessary for what are an amazing people, the Iranian people, highly educated, very capable technologically, to allow the Iranian people to have access to the world markets in a way that will allow their country to re-enter the global stage in the way that we all pray that it will.
You know, Secretary Pompeo, you've got, just to switch the topics a little bit here, you've got a new piece up at ACLJ.org. I really like this one. I think our folks will really like sharing this too on their social media so their friends and family see it. And I encourage them to do it. It's titled "Wokeness is a Threat to Our Military." You bring up, among other things, the Air Force Academy, where cadets are being told to avoid committing what they're calling microaggressions. And these microaggressions, just so people understand what the Air Force Academy is defining these as, simple things such as, quote, saying, "you guys," and even the term terrorist, with terms that have been deemed, quote, less offensive. Why is this the focus of a U.S. military academy?
Jordan, it's unexplainable to me. And worse than that, it's dangerous. You all know the ACLJ has been at the forefront of making sure that our folks in uniform have the capacity to express their voices, to protect liberty, religious freedom inside the military. And frankly, all across the country, you all have been exemplars of that and fought for it vigorously. This is another chance for government to move away from tradition. When you think about militaries and how they're built on culture, on heritage, and on tradition. And when you begin to walk away, when you tell them, I think you did mention, don't talk about mom and dad, just talk about parents and parental units. This is a use of language which denies what we know to fundamentally be true. And it loses the mission focus. Our militaries are designed for the singular purpose of deterring bad guys. When we have to focus on diversity, equity, inclusion in this way, it's dangerous for one of America's core institutions, its military.
But you hear parental units. I mean, that's like the code heads.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like we're making them use language. It's not
even natural.
It's not natural at all, right? So I mean, you have to really reprogram yourself to even start speaking that way.
Yeah, it's unreal. We appreciate it, Mr. Secretary. As always, thank you for your insight and input, and it's great to call you a colleague and a friend. Thanks for being on the broadcast.